Hello again. Welcome to another Project GaitWay episode. Wow, I said project really weirdly there, which means we're off to a good start. Welcome back. So today we have Petra. Petra is a movement educator, someone who spends a lot of time in her body. And I don't know much about actually her current pain or complaints with her body. Only thing I really know is she's having some problems with her right foot. So we'll just go based off of that wee bit of information. But again, the intention of these videos is to play a bit of a game and see what we can infer or guess about injury history, activity history, life history, whatever the case is, just from how someone is walking and standing. So I have fun with these. The goal isn't to give advice or to try to create solutions, but just to really dig into why could this body be moving the way that it is and have some fun with it and improve our observational skills while we're at it. So we're going to start with static posture and really just see what stands out. So the first thing that stands out to me is Petra's head, actually. I can't draw lines because I'm not in coach's eye, so I don't have a line drawing app. Or do I? Oh, can I do this? So I'm doing this in real time and not, by the way, having planned anything. Oh, it looks like I do have a pen device. Okay, this might not be great, but we'll see how this works. Petra's head looks like it's a bit shifted to the right. So I might get really annoyed with this pen thing here. But you can see like there's the center of her body here, and her head looks like it's a bit over to the right-hand side of it. It also looks as if her head is rotated to the left. So what that kind of configuration will do when we have a head that is, let's say, shifted to the right on top of a rib cage, which we haven't really talked about where her rib cage is, but I actually have to draw that again. So let's say this is the rib cage and the head is over here. So there's going to be a little bit of a S shape in the neck. That was, again, a terrible drawing. In high school, my worst grade was actually art. There we go. So that's kind of the shape we're looking at, where there's a little bit of a side bend to one side, then it corrects back to the other. And that's kind of what we get when there's a shift in the head. So we might be seeing there's like a little bit of grumpiness potentially, well, really on either side of her neck. Possibly. Anyway, I think I'm going to actually close this pen thing because it's bugging me. So her head stands out to me. It also looks like her whole rib cage is rotated to the left. It looks like her left shoulder is a little bit closer to us, the viewer, from this perspective. And it looks like her right shoulder is a little bit rolled forwards. And you can see that extra little bit of space between her body and her arm. I'm not sure what's happening there. If that's her arm that's farther from her side, or if her whole rib cage is kind of pushed over to one side. I'm not really sure. Hopefully we'll see a bit closer of a view of that from the front. And if we had to choose, does it look like she's standing more over top of one foot than the other? I almost want to say it looks like she's standing more on her left leg, but I don't know. It's pretty even. Nothing too crazy stands out. Knowing she has some troubles with her feet, let's just look down at what's happening here. So it kind of looks like to me her left tibia, lower leg, is more internally rotated, and her right one looks pretty, I want to say, neutral in terms of rotation. But again, we don't know really which one is the more neutral one. We just know they look a little bit different. Like her right foot is pointing out a little bit more, her left foot is pointing in a little bit more. Now on her right foot, it looks like it's more broad, doesn't it? If we look at the inside edge of her foot, there's more tissue bulging inwards than on her left foot. It looks a bit more narrow. So it looks like she might be quite a bit more pronated through that left midfoot area and the rear foot area as well. Her heel on the right looks a bit more everted, so more tipped inwards. And that would make sense with a foot that's more turned out to me to have a bit more of a pronated type shape. But it really is interesting. She has more of a broad pancakey foot on the right and more narrow on the left. So more narrow foot is usually more of a supinated structure. But I gotta say, like, I have an affinity for Petra's feet. They look just super, super cute. And like, I don't know, they're just super cute. It's a really weird thing to say, but uh, cute looking feet. I just like how wide they are. I feel like it'd be really nice to have feet that are wide like that. But appearances aren't everything. Even people with feet that look nice and cute and wide, they can have trouble. Anyway, now the back of her knees look different as well. See that extra line on her left, on the inside of her left knee? I'm not sure exactly what that means right now. But it kind of looks like it's a bit more of a turned in thigh, like more internally rotated. We'll have to confirm that looking at the front view. I can't say anything certainly for certain. But what's interesting about that is she also has this lower leg that's turned in. And if that's coupled with a thigh that's turned in too, then that means her whole leg is turned in. Maybe, we'll see. Now, another thing that strikes me is the shape of her thighs, left and right, are very different. She has more of a fullness to her right thigh, and the left one looks like there's like around the middle of it, it's not quite as developed. So why would one thigh be more developed than the other? That's not something that just happens overnight. Muscles develop because we use them, because we put our weight into our legs and demand something of them. So I wonder if this is a weight bearing thing that we're noticing, if she actually doesn't weight bear as much into her left leg for whatever reason. So why don't we take a look at whoops, wrong person, front view. Hi, Petra. Okay, so it does look like from the front view as well, there's that rotation in her spine to the left. Now, this is really interesting from the front. The difference in her two thighs is more apparent. You can see the fullness of her left quad development, adductor development, and it looks like a little less development on the left leg. Super interesting. Same thing with the foot. We noticed her right foot, it looks a bit more wide and broad, and the left foot looks a bit more narrow. You can also see in her right foot, it looks like there's a bit more gripping in the toes. And this is quite common for a foot that is more pronated. There will be a tendency for the toes to be more plantar flexed, going down into the ground a bit more on a more pronated foot. It also is a strategy for someone who is trying to hold themselves up if they don't have the mechanics higher up. Gary Ward of Anatomy and Motion often talks about the toes as the last line of defense. Now, her left foot is interesting from the front as well. Can you see her big toe on the left looks like it's pushing into the ground more. And like the ball of her big toe is up off the floor. It's like she doesn't have a ball of a big toe on that left foot, but she has the tip of her big toe. So that first metatarsal joint looks like it's quite plantar flexed. Almost like that whole first ray is supinating her foot. And it's interesting, the toes on her left foot look like they're kind of pointing all different directions, but they're much more organized on the right. Look at the difference between her toenails, even right and left. I don't know what any of that means. Now you'll notice there's a cyst on her right foot, and I think that's part of her complaint on her right foot as well. I don't know if it's a painful cyst or if it's just a curiosity. Very interesting. Okay, looking at her knees, they look different, the way that the muscles, not just in the development, but in the tension in them. And I'm having a hard time really being able to suss out if one leg looks more turned in or out. I'm hoping this will show up a bit more clearly in motion. But what it kind of looks like to me is her patella on the left. It's a bit more tipped inwards almost. And a little bit like the muscles around it are pulled up more taut. So I wonder if anything ever happened to that knee. I'm very curious to see how it's moving. Again, we can kind of see there's a head rotation to the left, and a spine rotation to the left. And the sense that her head is shifted off to the right-hand side. Side view. By the way, we are hanging out here in the Don Valley Brickworks in Toronto. Beautiful, beautiful area. What's kind of fun is to look at the knees and the feet from the side. So the back of her knees looked a bit different to me, so I'm wondering, does that knee look bent or straight? And we can see her right calf poking out behind her left knee. So we might have a bit of a bend in her left knee. Let's see what the other side view. Whoops, that's the video. Other side view, there we go. Yeah, so her right knee does look a bit straighter. It's pushed back farther, so we can't see her left calf. It's hidden by her right knee being pushed back straighter. And the outside of her foot, it does look like there is more of a pronated shape to that right foot. The space between her lateral malleolus there, right underneath it, you see there's a bit of shadowing there, like it's a bit of a cave, a bit of a valley. And then in her other side, it's a bit more full, like underneath that fibula on the outside. It's less caved in there. So we are seeing less of a pronated foot on the left side, more of a pronated foot on the right side. And it's curious because when we have a more supinated foot, like hers is on the left, we would expect that to happen with a more extended knee. But instead, Petra's got a bent knee and a supinated foot, or more supinated, less pronated. And then here, she has a more extended knee and a pronated foot. Super interesting. So it makes me wonder, is her knee straightened back like that because that's her body's way of trying to supinate her foot and block it from pronating farther? When you straighten your knee, it should pull your arch up and supinate your foot and put your weight to the outside of your foot. So I wonder if her right knee is pushing back so that her foot just doesn't pronate so much. Okay, so that's probably enough to start with. Let's take a look at her video. Okay. We'll watch full speed. See if anything stands out. Okay, let's watch that again. Now I'm really drawn to her right, her super cute. I'm drawn to her left leg. That looks like when it swings through, it's twisting inwards a little more. So watch on the way back. Her left leg to me seems to twist inwards a little bit more than her right one does. Let's go in half speed. Yeah, it's like both of her legs want to point to the right transverse plane, so a right rotation in both legs. So that would be a right leg externally rotating and her left leg internally rotating. That's kind of what it looks like is happening to me. It also looks to me like she shifts more into her right leg than her left one. Shall we do that again? One more time, slow speed, and then we'll break it down. And you see how her head just stays off to the right-hand side of her body. So her head is more over there. Okay, super curious to break this down. All right, sip of tea before we do. Okay, so we're going to get her into a few strides, and we'll begin in a right mid stance, left early swing. So her left leg is going into early swing, and her right leg is going in a mid stance position. So what do we see here? Anything that stands out? One thing that's nice to clock is the amount of rotation in the knee and tibia. And it doesn't look like it's a crazy amount. In her posture, it looked like her left tibia was more internally rotated than her right one. So I wonder if that will show up in her gait as well. One thing that's worth noting here is in a mid stance, generally, we want the body to be pretty stacked up, head right over top of the rib cage, over top of the pelvis. That's supposed to be a happy face. But we have a bit of a interesting configuration with Petra where her head looks like it's over here to the right. Her rib cage looks like it's a little over here to the left. And her pelvis is, again, like a little bit more over to the right. So a bit of a ziggy-zag, not completely stacked up. So that's interesting. Is her foot doing, her right foot, we want to see it supinating here. And it looks like it's blurry. Can't really see it. Well, it doesn't really look like her foot supinates there. So we'll have to compare it to the other side, but that right foot is her more pronated foot. So it wouldn't be surprising if that foot did not supinate. Okay, let's take her into a left swing. Oh, interesting. Into a heel strike. So here's her heel on the left foot is off the ground and Let's wait for it to touch right about there. Okay, left heel strike. Well, she looks pretty stacked up here with her body anyway. She's more stacked head, rib cage, pelvis than she was in mid stance. However, in a heel strike, we don't want you to be perfectly stacked up. Actually, this is where we want a little bit of chaos. We should see something a bit more like this happening. So we're seeing that head shift to the right still happening, but we're not really seeing much else. This is the one moment where the body is permitted to go off axis, meaning this banana shape through the spine, not stacked up in the frontal plane. So she does have a bit of that going on. What about her left foot? What we want to see in a left foot in a heel strike is that you're landing on the outside posterior aspect of the heel. She is not completely there. I mean, if we had another frame between this one and this one, we might see her landing a bit more on the outside of her foot, but it's not terrible. Like she's not landing on a pronated foot. Okay, let's keep going. Put her into a left foot pronation. So we're going to wait for her toes to land on the ground. About there. All right. I love Petra's wide feet. I bet it's tough to find shoes that actually will accommodate your feet, and probably why you like being barefoot so much more. Like shoes just weren't really designed to accommodate people that have lovely wide feet. Okay, so what stands out to me here, her right foot, do you see how all of the ball of her foot is off the ground? And we would like it to still be on the ground with the 2 points of contact first and fifth metatarsal heads, but she's just rolling off of her big toe there. Now, look at the angle of this leg. That's quite a bit of a valgusy angle that I think is due to a rotation, and it looks like that rotation is happening through her pelvis to the right, and her leg is getting pulled to the right into an internal rotation there as well, which is exactly what should be happening when you land on a pronated foot. But I think that's actually like too much. We'll have to see her right leg to compare it. And again, we're still seeing her head off to the right. So I wonder if there was ever a neck or head injury accident impact that may have come in, hit the side of the head, pushed the head over to the side, never got back again. I wonder. Let's move her into now her right side is going to go into an early swing phase, and the left side is going to go into a mid stance. And she just continues to twist her pelvis to the right. That's interesting. So do you see how she's in a kind of right pelvis rotation, and it stays like that? Like just look at how her shorts are kind of swooshing off that way. So when she actually gets into, we'll put her knees side by side. Oh, that's interesting. So the angle of her lower leg, it doesn't look like it's that much more externally rotated than her other side. If we go back to where we came from here, so look at the amount of her left leg external rotation, so how much her toes look like they're pointing off to the side, and then compare that to here. It's actually not that much different. I was expecting there to be more on this side, but it's pretty similar when she's actually in motion. But what's interesting here is that rotation through her pelvis to the right. That looks like it's a bit too much. And when you're going from here, where the left foot is pronated and fully weight bearing, and the right leg starts to swing forward, we would like to see her pelvis begin right here to twist to the left. And hers is not. She is staying to the right. She has got this right rotation through the pelvis and a left rotation through her spine. Now that's really interesting because that kind of setup would make it easier for her to access phases of gait with her left leg forward, like this and this. So I'm curious about that because in theory, if it's easier for her to get her left leg forward, why is her left thigh less developed? Because the leg that's forward is the more, generally speaking, the one that you're going to weight bear on more. You're always traveling into the leg that's swinging forward. So I'm kind of baffled right now. Anyway, back into her mid stance. What's different about her left mid stance here is if you watch her left foot as her right leg swings forward, you see her foot actually it does tip outwards. It does invert. Look at her heel and how when she's here, she in theory is pronating. You can see after her heel strike, her heel tips inwards, and then it actually does resupinate again, which is fantastic. However, her pelvis above, it looks like it's still rotated to the right and hiked up on the left. So we could just generally say her foot is supinating, but her pelvis is still pronating. What we'd like to see really is level. Okay, so let's see what happens when she starts to swing her right leg forward. Okay, so she's getting into her right heel strike. Now this just looks a lot more confident to me. That looks like like a really nice lateral contact. And her left foot looks nicely supinated. Her pelvis is quite level. Shoulders, a reminder that we do want to see like a little bit of a side bend through the rib cage here, not a totally straight spine, but again, her head is still off to the right. But I mean, that's kind of the nicest looking heel strike I've seen in a long time. Just that contact point. That's very rare. Gold star, Petra. What's interesting about that, though, is that we know this is the foot that is more pronated. So in motion, her body is behaving the opposite kind of what I was expecting based on her standing posture. It's always fascinating. And then when she lands on the ground, does that right foot actually pronate? So watch her right foot making its journey. Strike. And she should start to roll towards the inside of her foot, which it looks like she does, and then she doesn't. Oh, that's cool. So she goes on the lateral border or lateral heel. Then she starts to go to the inside. And then watch this. She goes back to the outside of her foot again. Does she get onto the inside a bit? Right about there. Yeah, so she doesn't really pronate in a clean way. It looks like it's just a bit strange, for lack of better words. So I think where we're seeing her toe finally get on the ground, it's right about there. And what's interesting here is her whole left foot is off the ground. But we can see, remember the angle of her leg on the left side here? It was more of that kind of thing. Here we have a bit more of a vertical femur. So less of an internal rotation in her leg. If we go back to her left side, pronating left foot, right there. See this big angle here? That's, I think, the internal rotation of her leg. And I think we're seeing her pelvis is just staying rotated right. So it's dragging her right femur to the right and her left femur to the right. So everything's rotating right, giving us an femur that's getting pulled into internal rotation with the pelvis. So I wonder if she can actually rotate her hips. It kind of looks like her hips and her femurs, or her pelvis and her femurs rather, they're a technical term, like a clump, and they go in the same direction. Instead of having rotation of the femur within the acetabulum of the pelvis, they are clumped together, and it's all pointing to the right. That's so interesting. So it looks like right, and then her feet are like, no, we're gonna go left. So we've got more of a pronation in the foot on the right and more of a supination in the foot on the left, which is at complete odds with what's happening from the knees up. So, like, where did that begin? Is a very good question. But then that kind of explains a bit more why we might see more development of the right leg muscles. If for a long time this has been at place, this rotation, then it might just have, veered her into standing more on her right leg. That's the way her body's pointing. On top of having a head that's more off to the right-hand side, that's going to put about 10 more pounds over top of your right leg over the course of a life, lifting a 10-pound weight more on one side than the other for years. That could develop the muscles a bit more. I'm just speculating. None of this is necessarily true. Then we're back at the beginning. So let's take a look at her coming forward and see if there's anything else that jumps out before we wrap up. So we'll go back into where we just were, which is her right heel strike. And you can see that left femur internally rotating there, which is pulling her left foot with it into it. Looks like it's getting a bit more like internal rotation even into the ankle there. So even though it looked like a more supinated foot, it looks like it's not really supinating when she's walking. It just is mind-blowing to me that someone's body, it looks like when it's standing, it's assuming a certain position. And then when it's moving, it's doing the opposite of how it's standing. It just shows how you never want to assume anything. Now, I'm just looking at her right arm that wants to swing out to the side a little bit here. I wonder what's happening on the other side. So we're just going to fast forward to her left leg heel strike. Interesting. So her left arm, doesn't swing out to the side. It stays close to her body. That's how she was standing in the beginning as well. So that's one thing that seems to be pretty consistent from static to dynamic, is her right arm being a bit more abducted. You can see here, rib cage rotating left, pelvis rotating right. And look at that left foot going into a heel strike that looks more pronated. Very interesting. And that right foot looking pretty pronated back there too. But her her right femur does look more externally rotated. So again, it's like there's this disconnect from here and her feet. Her feet are doing one thing, one personality in the feet, and another personality in the lumbopelvic femoral area. And then what's up with the arms? Okay, so if we go back to where we were, see her going into her right heel strike, and how that right arm, watch as it swings backwards, it goes to the side, so it doesn't really extend. And we need that arm to extend behind her in order to take her rib cage into a right rotation, which she is not getting. So a few things that she's missing are right rotation of the ribs, rib cage and spine, and a left rotation pelvis. I had to think about that for a minute to make sure I was remembering correctly. Yeah, her pelvis does not want to get to the right. It should be rotating to the right here. It kind of does, but not enough. Maybe that's why we're seeing that foot pronating here. Okay. So very interesting. So I'm going to wrap this up, and all I can really make guesses about is where to begin the reorganization process and what might have caused these interesting patterns. I'm curious about Petra's head position because it's consistently to the right-hand side of her body. Now that can be either the result of an actual incident, like a bonk on the head, or like a neck accident where her head was whipped sideways, or it could be her head is shifting over to the right side in order to get a bit of weight into her right leg. But I don't know which is the case, so Petra can fill us in on if anything happened to her head or neck, or if there was anything that happened on her right leg where it might have been not super trustworthy feeling to weight bear into it. So while her whatever happened on her right leg was healing up, maybe she had to shift her weight into her right leg, so her head just got pulled over to the right gradually over time to put weight there. But I'm not so sure. Because what's also with that pelvis that's constantly rotated to the, oh man, I'm gonna forget now which way, to the left. Is it to the left? What did we say? Easy to forget. Let's watch her again before I forget. It's really amazing to me how easy it is to lose track of what you're seeing from one moment to the next. That's right. Pelvis rotated to the right. Yeah. So what's with that rotation of the pelvis to the right, which is showing up in turning this left leg in and the right leg out more, all that right rotation through the lower body, except for the feet. What is going on there? Did anything happen to the left side, like left hip, where we're seeing this kind of spinning out of the left hip? Did something like that happen there? I mean, this is where we get to fill in the gaps with the history and make sense of things. What is a sort of a compensation strategy, and what is the result of a direct accident where a body part just is now not moving to its full potential and the body is trying to find ways of compensating around that? But I don't know, I'm kind of drawn to the skull and the way it's off to the right hand side. That's what I would ask about. And if there was anything in her history there, I would want to see if we got the head to sit a bit more centered through whatever means one has in one's toolkit, would that influence how her pelvis is rotating? And I'd love to hear if her pelvis can rotate right and left and what it feels like, and if there's a connection from her pelvis down to her feet. And knowing that this foot's like a bit more pronated at rest, I would want to know if anything happened to that foot, any accidents, injuries, sprains, something like that. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much, Petra, for letting us use your video. If you would love to fill in the gaps in the history or anything that you remember, please pop that into the comments of this video so we can all put our minds at ease. There's nothing more stressful than having gaps of information that create uncertainty. I mean, this is kind of fun, but at some level deep within my biology, I'm probably going to be stressing out about this in a joyful way, inquisitively, but I'd love to know. And anyone watching who feels like chiming in, please pop in some comments, questions, observations, speculations into the comments on YouTube here. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Project GaitWay. I said that again really weirdly, project. I never say that. I say project. Huh. Weird. On that note, let's wrap it up. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for watching.